What's up, Internet? It's Matt at Overkill Woodcraft, and I have a confession to make. This little hoarder pile of reclaimed and leftover lumber that I'm sitting on is a rat's nest. Maybe not literally a rat's nest, but I was going through it the other day and I stumbled across some bedding material that was about mouse size. So I thought I had it all kind of, stacked and piled together tightly enough to avoid anything like that, but apparently I didn't. So it's the excuse I finally needed to go ahead and make a lumber rack for this area, specifically this lumber rack. Insert mediocre magic edit. Woo. Yeah, in all seriousness, moving all of that out of the way wasn't fun, and I'm about to move it all back. But I guess it goes to show maybe I should have just done it right in the first place and built a lumber rack to begin with. Either way, I wanted to show you the lumber rack completed and bare before I load it back up. Because one, I can't stand when I'm like trying to figure out how to build something and they don't show like the completed deal until the end or whatever. So, and then two, just so I can go over some of the features for it, because this might not even work for you. This might not suit your needs as far as storing lumber goes, but I'm pretty sure it will. And the reason for that is because it's completely scalable to meet your needs. And also there's free plans for it in the description. Now, during the build process of this, it's pretty recommended that you at least kind of have the plans on hand so you can see what I'm talking about if you're trying to follow along. And the reason for that is the way I do things when I'm going through something like this is I don't refer to everything by the measurements because you might want to scale this to be different. Instead, I refer to each component by the color that I made it in SketchUp where I designed the plans. So that'll make things a little bit more clear and easier to follow along. Now, you might also be wondering why I made mine so short at just around 5 feet, and that's because I've got windows in the back that I didn't really feel like encroaching on my beautiful, serene, wooded view. It is pretty nice, in all seriousness. But the other reason, too, is I don't really feel like reaching up super high when I'm grabbing all the lumber off of here. I mean, I plan on having this thing loaded up, and it will be plenty strong enough to be completely loaded up. Now, as far as the material costs go, there's two different kind of variations you can make from this, and I promise I'm not overcomplicating things. But you'll notice here I've got two 2x4x10s that span across the entire back, one up here and then one right down there. If you decide you wanted to attach this to a wall or something, that would be how you would end up doing it. I don't want to attach mine to the wall. The reason I wanted this to be freestanding is because I really don't like drilling into my brick unless I absolutely have to. It'd be different if I had like CBS or, stucco or something like that. If I was back in Florida, I'd drill through that wall, no problem. But, brick can be a little fickle. So I like to avoid that when I can. And then as far as material cost for this go, if you don't feel like putting the two in the back, which you really don't need to, I think I ended up using 10 2x4x10s, which ends up being, I think, less than $60. So unless you find some, unicorn on Facebook Marketplace or something, I really don't think you're going to find a lumber rack out there, at least not freestanding, that can support as much weight as this is going to support and be, as durable as it is and cost what it cost. So I think it'll work for you. And if it doesn't, well, this video is still going to be loaded with a ton of tips and tricks that I've either picked up or learned that make doing stuff like this much more efficient. I think this took me 4 hours total to make. For a normal person, it would probably take less time because I tend to overkill everything. So with all that being said, I'll stop talking and get into the build process. Aside from the lumber, here's everything you're going to need for this build. 2 to 3 clamps, squares, possibly. The lumber that I'm using is pretty jacked up. It's a bunch of offcuts and everything. So there could be a few instances where a square comes in handy, but as long as you're cutting everything at a perfect 90 and 45-degree angle, you really shouldn't need those. 2.5 and 3.5 inch construction screws. Don't worry, you don't need these expensive $55 each boxes. For the 2.5, you should be able to get away with a box about that size, the medium box, and then for the 3.5, you really just need a smaller box. Some wood glue, of course. If your lumber rack's going to be subject to rain, sure, you can use Titebond 3, but it really doesn't matter because there's going to be so many screws in this, and Titebond 2 is pretty water resistant / waterproof to begin with, and it's what I have more of on hand. and then a good drill driver combo with a nice countersink bit. I won't bore you with the process of cutting every single component, but I will say it does help to have some system in place that makes cutting all of these components easily repeatable and exact. In this instance, I just have a square clamped to my miter station. Speaking of not boring you, during the build process, I do countersink every hole. I'm just not going to show that, or this video would be extremely long. And then finally, I do apologize in advance for some of the audio distortion during the build process. For some reason, my mic decibels crept up and I didn't even realize it. So I did my best to edit it and not have it be so painful on your ears. Once you have all your components cut the length, I've learned from past experience, it really helps to go ahead and label each one of them, however you wish to do that. For me, I just like to color code them. So to start this off, we're going to take those two outside pieces that I colored blue and the plans, and we're going to place these down. One's going to be back. I like to have this closer to the edge of my workbench where my overhang lip is, so I have something to clamp onto. And then we're going to take one of our 2 feet at the bottom, and we're just going to put that there, okay? It's going to act as a spacer and a gauge. Then we're going to take our brown piece and set it there, and we're going to get ready to clamp it. First, I'm going to go ahead and put a ton of glue on it. Just as a reference, I'll keep my square there, and that'll let me know where I need to stop my glue. Just make sure everything's kind of lined up for the most part. All right, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and clamp that down. And make sure it doesn't shift when you're clamping it. Everything's still good. Now, because I'm going to be attaching screws into all of these middle pieces in multiple different places from each side, I try to keep track of where, my screws are going when I'm on a certain side. So because I'm in the middle right now and I'm screwing this middle to the outside, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and keep my screws closer to the middle. All right, so that way when I come back around and I'm attaching screws from the different side, we'll keep them closer to the outside, and I don't have to worry about potentially running into another screw and breaking a countersink bit or anything like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to essentially my second from the bottom support, the red piece. Don't worry about this foot. We'll come back to that later. But I'm going to get my red piece on here. If you want, you can make sure it's square. But yeah, I've got this flush up against here and my square is up against it. It's about as close as it's going to get for the lumber. Now I'm just going to go ahead and apply some glue to the bottom of that red piece, and where that red piece is going to be attached to the middle. And then I'm going to clamp it. And I want to keep this clamp in the middle of my 2x4 here, okay? Because again, keeping in the mindset of knowing where I've placed previous screws, along with staggering them out like I'm going to do here, is just going to make it a lot stronger to begin with. So I'm keeping this in the middle because I'm going to place my 2 screws on this, row of boards. I'm going to place them on the top and bottom, all right? And then when I have to attack it from the other side, I'm going to place them on the front and back, but you'll see what I'm talking about. Next up is a pink spacer. Again, just repeating this process here. And then we'll put some glue on the top of that red piece, just as a little bit of added support here. I'm going to move my clamp over. And again, I'm going to go closer to the middle with these 2.5-inch screws. And I probably should have clarified that in the first place, that I'm using 2.5-inch screws right now. When you need the 3.5-inch screws, I'll tell you that we're changing over to the 3.5-inch screws. And now it's time for our yellow horizontal bar. Again, going top and bottom here. And for our last spacer, one more pink piece. Pop quiz, where am I placing these 2 screws? Closer to the middle. That's correct. And our last horizontal support bar, a green piece up here at the very top. And again, top and bottom. Now that that's done, we're gonna move back down to our 2 feet. This one isn't attached yet, so I'm just gonna slide it out, put some glue on top of there, and pretty much just by feel, go ahead and make sure that this is all lined up. Now, because this is the foot and the base piece, I will just check with my square. First, I'll make sure I don't get any glue on my nice fancy red square. Yeah, so I was off just a little bit because this piece of wood is warped. So I'll give that just a little adjustment. Then I'll bring my clamp down. Go ahead and unclamp that. And now we're going to grab that light blue component that has the 45-degree cuts on each end. Go ahead and put some glue on there. And then I'm just going to kind of wing it. Doesn't need to be a ton of glue here. I'm going to take my clamp. I'm just kind of going diagonally here. Now this will be the one time that we break from the 2.5-inch screws and switch over to the 3.5-inch screws, is just to go ahead and put one in here kind of like that. The reason why I wanted to add this 45-degree piece, yes, I know it will eat up some of the usable space that I can store lumber on here, but not a ton, and I can still stack lumber up here. But I didn't want all of the weight of this entire rack, including, you know, the 3 tiers above this tier, to be solely focused on or placed onto this pivot point right here. I just wanted a little bit of extra support, and it's probably not necessary, but it's called Overkill Woodcraft for a reason. So I'm just gonna kind of center my countersink here in the middle and drive that in. So this next component is probably unnecessary and not needed, but I had the scraps and I figured why not? If anything, it would just add a little bit more reinforced support up there. In the plans, I have it set up to where it's basically just a 2x4 scrap that would go in there. And that's probably all you need. But another thought process for me was this gap right here that would be created if I did this is just one more place that rodents could, make a home. And then I like to just zigzag these components. So now that we essentially have 2/3 of this done, we'll go ahead and we'll take our other foot, we'll put it down. It's just gonna act as a spacer right now. And then we'll take our other outside blue component and get this set on here and get ready to glue, clamp, and screw it on here. It does help if you just use another blue component that you're not using at the time, or just some scraps to kind of keep this propped up. But I'll go ahead and flip this over, put all the glue on it. This is why I talked about keeping my equal spacing here, okay? I've got my 2 in the middle, so when I put this down, and then I've got my 2 up in, the top and bottom. So when I go ahead and put this down, after I get it clamped into place, I'll be going more towards the outside, and then I'll be going front and back. And we're still with the 2.5-inch screws. And we'll get ready to attach this last foot, some on top. Clamp it in place, make sure everything's lined up. Normally with my ADHD, I would have marked on this board where to drill or not to drill, because I've already got screws in there, but I do remember I zigzagged it like that. So I'm just gonna do the opposite here. And I'll do my last 2. So this is where the 3.5-inch screws are really gonna come into play. You can see here with the 2.5-inch screw, it only goes through 2 boards, obviously, because these boards are about 1.5 inches thick. But if I do a 3.5-inch screw, I'm gonna go ahead and hit through all 3 boards. So because I've already got them sandwiched together really well from this side, I'm gonna take this, flip it, and then now I'm coming through the outside of this outer piece, which doesn't have anything holding it, any screws holding it in place from this direction. All the screws have been holding it in place from this direction. So basically, because I know I didn't touch any of the middles, I'm just going to go ahead and place a couple 3.5-inch screws in these middles for a little bit of added final support. So now that 5 of these components have been made, I'm going to go ahead and just roughly assemble them. It'll just be a little bit easier when I get things out there on that uneven ground, you know, versus having to assemble them on the uneven ground, I should say. And so for that, I'm using my black pieces. And the easiest way for me to just get this done is by using a 36-inch clamp. No glues needed here. This is really more so just to keep each tier, each of the 5 tiers, at the same height, you know, at the same kind of plane or whatever. And how I did it in the plan was I kind of staggered them. So what I'll do is I'll start by attaching 2 screws in here. And then once I have that done, I can remove my clamps and I'll attach a screw in the middle. And I'll do that on the bottom rung as well. And I'm able to come in from the outsides because I staggered these supports and they won't be, you know, overlapping or butted up against each other. So this again will just make it easier to assemble once I have it in its final spot. I'm just going to use the 2.5-inch screws here. Split that one a bit. Should have taken that further down, but it'll survive. All right, going to rinse and repeat on the bottom rung and then attach them all from the outside. And now that I have 2 of them connected, I of course have to climb on it. I'm about 200 pounds, so I feel pretty comfortable with that. So now that I have these 2 connected and these 2 connected, I'll go ahead and connect them together. And I'll start by doing that on the 3rd rung. And then I'll go down and I'll connect the bottom rung. And then I'll do my last column down here at the end. Again, I'm just kind of roughly getting them in place. And then I'll clamp them together. The main thing is I don't want this black piece coming over my my arm here that'll be holding the lumber, because then it'll just end up getting in the way, obviously. So again, I'm doing 2 through the face. All right, now onto the bottom. Now that I've got those done, I'll come in from the outsides with 1 screw in the middle of my arms here. And for these, I'll use a 3.5-inch screw. All right, time for the last column. Okay, so now all 5 columns are attached to each other, and you know, the lumber rack's looking like an actual lumber rack, except you know, I don't have to have a degree in engineering to know that this is far from being level right now. And if I'm being totally honest, I don't really care too much about it being level, you know, this way, horizontally. But when it comes to front to back horizontal, I'm definitely off a little bit. See, there you have it. That's about how far off I am right now. And that would be an issue, because then, especially since this lumber rack won't be attached to the wall, you know, it could easily slide off. But the other thing is, this isn't even my final destination for it yet. I'm going to end up sliding it over a little bit, because on this side, I ultimately, in the future, at some point, might want to just get some real like industrial metal shelving, like garage shelving, and have it there for bowl blanks and everything to dry out. So I went ahead and slid this down just a little bit and got it to where I want it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to attach 2 2x10s to the back side. And in my situation, that's just going to be for a little bit of added stability. But if you did not want this to be a freestanding lumber rack and you wanted to secure it to the wall, or, you know, even pillars, or, you know, post, or whatever the case may be, that would be how you would do it. So how I'm going to go about attaching this 2x10 here on the back, kind of roughly get it in place, because you want to be in between with both this top one and the bottom one. You want to make sure you're in between those black pieces, or, you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly in between, but in between enough to where when you're coming in from the front to go attach it to a wall, you know, your black pieces aren't going to be in the way. So what I'm basically just going to do is, I know my 2x is 3.5 inches. So I'll go down 4 inches and then whatever, I'll just call it another 8 inches or 8 inches total. So I'm going to mark a little line here, because if you're ever out working and you need to do something with long, awkward lumber and you don't have 2 sets of hands, like I usually don't, this is just a little trick for how to get things done. You don't have to mark all of them. The reality is you really only need to mark the ones on the outsides, those 2. Now what I'll do is I'll take my combo square and just clamp it in place right at that 8-inch mark. And then I'm going to go down to the other end and do the same thing. This 2x10 does not have to be completely level by any means, but this will get it close enough. So it'll definitely help to have a few clamps on deck ready to grab onto, especially because I know that these 2x10s I'm using, wow, you can see they're pretty cupped. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna place my cupped end, or my cupped side, excuse me, on the inside. And then when you do have cupped lumber like this, I personally like to clamp the middle of it first, where it's cupped the worst. All right, cool. So there, I've got that. I'm resting on my speed square here, and I'm resting on my speed square down there. So just go ahead and clamp a few more in place. 2.5-inch screws would be more than suitable here, but I've got a bunch of 3.5-inch in my little magnet bowl, so that's what I'm going to go with. All right, now that it's secured, I'm probably going to do 1 or 2 more into each of these columns, because I have a sickness called Overkill, but I think you get the gist of it for the filming purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. I'm going to attach the bottom one off camera, get it in place, get it level, and we'll go from there. All right, and as you can see, there's those 2 support pieces that you would use to screw through this way and connect to a wall. All right, well, here it is, all loaded up. I have no idea how much weight is actually on here, but my back is telling me that it's a lot. And I'm about to put some more on there because I have room, plenty of room. In fact, the only thing I might change about this design is, in the future, if I don't end up putting a metal rack down there for storing my bowl blanks that'll be drying out, I might just add another column to it to have 6 total. That'd be easy enough to do. Like I said, completely scalable and expandable. So hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. Until then, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. Take it easy. Now I need to do something about this rat's nest.